Good evening and welcome to Sustainability Live. I'm Mark Westwind. Thank you all for joining us. The extraordinary heat waves over the last couple of weeks may not be so rare in the future. And we all know that California is and will continue to be at risk for prolonged droughts. So with water as a very precious resource and increasingly so, how do we as homeowners create an attractive landscape that's low in water demand? Our topic tonight is enhancing your backyard habitat with native plants. Our guest is Kelly Marshall, owner of Kelly Marshall Garden Design. Kelly specializes in creating beautiful California native and low water garden designs that are appropriate for our climate. She also teaches workshops on sheet mulching, inline drip irrigation, and low water garden design throughout the year. Kelly is a longtime resident of Clayton and has been a participant in the Bringing Back the Natives garden tour since 2008, either showcasing client gardens or her own. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I noted in your bio that you refer to Clayton as a microclimate hell. Why is that?
Well, if it snows anywhere in the interior East Bay, it snows at my house. The frost is brutal. And so sometimes I can literally just go down the hill from Clayton into Walnut Creek and see succulents growing there that in my garden would be mush after a cold night. And yet in the summer, quite often we are the hottest point in the Bay Area. So because I sit, my yard slopes up, and so even stuff at the lowest level in my garden sometimes can't tolerate what it can tolerate higher up on the hill. So it's been quite an experiment for 15 years now. So I get to try all of it, I guess. You know, hail, the normal stuff too. But yeah.
Great. So share with us some tips about developing a drought tolerant and drought low water garden.
Well, I would say planning is a really big part of it, whether it's you or you hire a professional. When we get into my presentation in a little bit, I'm going to really hone in on having a plan, particularly when it comes to native plants and understanding what the plant's going to do. It's really deceiving sometimes when you buy a really small plant in a little 4-inch pot and you read that it's going to get 12 feet wide, and you pop it in the ground right up next to your front door, and it gets 12 feet wide. So, so I can't tell you all my secrets yet because they're coming later in my presentation.
Good. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Okay. Why don't you get us off to a start? Go ahead.
Okay. So the reason that I really got started with natives is about a year into my business, I volunteered for the native tour. And I don't know, it was a whim. I saw it listed in the paper. It was this beautiful little garden in Walnut Creek. It was Judy Adler's garden, and she's really big into wildlife. And I thought, oh, that sounds cool. I think I'll go, stand in her garden as a docent. And I fell in love with natives the day I was there. So I began to sort of sneak them into designs, just as part of an overall low water plant palette. And, sometimes when you start talking to people about natives, they picture tumbleweeds blowing through the yard in the middle of the summer, or rock everywhere. And, when you start talking about drought tolerance. So I snuck them in the beginning. And then I was worried that I was maybe a little too nichey, being super low water. And then we've had, sort of endless drought year after year. I don't really think that's going to change unless a ton of people exit the state and there's suddenly an abundance of water. I know we had a couple of weird rainstorms in the last few weeks, but generally we have a summer dry Mediterranean climate. Natives work really well in our climate. So now I have people asking me for natives, but they ask me, they tell me, I want natives because I want low maintenance, or I want natives because I don't want to water. And those are not always necessarily good reasons to use natives. So I continue to use natives because I like the idea of it and I know it's appropriate for the climate. But there is an even more important reason to use natives. And now that we are all spending so much more time at home and in our gardens, it's really great to sort of change your surroundings, be more in tune with what's necessary with climate change. And so I'm going to launch my little presentation here and tell you a little bit more about that. So let me open that. All right, everybody see that okay?
Yep, looks
Okay,
good.
so enhance your backyard habitat with California natives. Why use California natives? Well, this is a picture of my front yard taken a few years ago. This is probably, it's got to be at least July, because the California fuchsia, which is the red blooming plant there, doesn't usually start till sometime in July. So as you can see, it is not just all dry and you know, brown midsummer and that sort of thing, but even more importantly, here's why. Natives are perfectly suited to our climate. Somewhere in this state, they are growing with or without us, and they were here before us. Many of them, but not all of them, are low water, and a lot of them are low maintenance. And I want to tell you, there is a native for every garden. If you are nervous about getting started with natives, or you've heard they're difficult, trust me, you can do it. If you plan a garden properly with natives, there's something always interesting going on in the garden, literally from January to December. And later on in my little slideshow presentation here, I'll show you a month-by-month bloom calendar for the humans, because people don't want just green, even though that's a shade of color. We want something else interesting going on. But here's the most important reason to use natives in your garden. I have too many things on my screen. Okay. I don't know. Okay. If you build it, they really will come. Every photo that you're seeing on the screen was taken in my garden. So let me show you. Top left is an oriole visiting one of my many fountains, and I have fountains on 3 sides of my 4 sides of my house, so that I have a water source for everybody who comes into my garden. The middle shot is narrowleaf milkweed with a monarch caterpillar, and that is their only food source once they hatch, and that's what monarchs lay their eggs on. And as you know, or may not know, monarchs are in big trouble in terms of survival these days. So anything that we can do to provide habitat for them is really important. The top right picture is a less than an hour old checker spot butterfly that hatched, and there's its little cocoon right above it there, and it was still drying out its wings and hadn't taken off yet for flight. Underneath that photo directly is the checker spot caterpillar that really invades that plant in the winter. That is California bee plant. And the butterflies lay their eggs, the caterpillars hatch, they munch the leaves down to almost nothing, and then they go off somewhere in the yard and cocoon and become those beautiful checker spot butterflies. The middle bottom is a new baby bluebird. Once we took out our lawn in the backyard and did primarily natives back there and put up a bluebird nesting box, we had several years, we've had bluebirds nest and raise young in the garden. And then to the left, a big old bumblebee on white sage. Without the plants in your garden that support these kinds of wildlife, they will pass your yard for somewhere else. Why does it matter? Well, this photo is Santa Cruz Island buckwheat. A client actually sent me this photo, and right here, if you can see my cursor, is the larva of a little caterpillar. There are 23 different butterflies that use this plant, so I don't know which larva this is, but without this plant in the garden, this larva wouldn't be here. And why does that matter? Well, a really simple explanation of the food web. Without the right plants in the garden, butterflies don't lay their eggs on those plants in your garden. Those eggs become caterpillars, and caterpillars become a primary food source for birds. And without without the plant, you don't have the caterpillar. Without the caterpillar, you don't have the birds. If any of you listened in on any of the 3 Sundays that we did Natives in the Garden this past April and May, since we took the native tour virtually, Doug Tallamy spoke, and it really is eye-opening to listen to him talk. He's an entomologist from, I believe, the University of Delaware, and he's done research on what plants support butterflies and caterpillars. So this is some of his information that he talks about that really made an impact on me. And I know that it's made an impact on a lot of other people too, because since he gave that talk in the spring, I probably get a phone call once or twice a week from somebody who heard him talk and is just as worried as the rest of us are in the native plant world about using the right plants to support diminishing wildlife. So 90% of the insects that eat plants can only eat the plants that they evolved with. There are 432 species of North American birds that are at risk of extinction, 3 billion fewer breeding birds compared to 45 years ago. I think about when I moved in this house 15 years ago and the birds that I used to hear out the windows. And the truth is, I don't hear all those birds anymore. I still have birds in my yard, but not the same sounds that I used to hear. So I know that they're diminished. And the good news is that you can use keystone plants from our native plant palette that provide 75% of the food that drives those food webs with caterpillars for birds. Hopefully I didn't rush that through that too quickly, but you can always go back and listen to Doug Tallamy's talk. Kathy Kramer, the woman who runs the Bringing Back the Natives garden tour, has posted that video. There's a link to it from her Bringing Back the Natives website. So some of California's keystone plants. These are just a handful that gives you an idea of the volume of caterpillars that could use them. So I won't read each of these out, but you can see, you know, oaks. Prunus is things like our Catalina cherry, not ornamental cherry, but Catalina cherry. And then there are other cherries in that family. Acers are some of our maples, like big leaf maple. Vine maple is another one. Ceanothus is California lilac, and Arctostaphylos is manzanita. But look at the vast number of choices that there are of those plants. Again, I know we could fit one of those in your garden. And look at the volume of caterpillars that they support if you have them in your garden to provide habitat. If you were planning for your own garden, and we are going to talk about it from a design perspective as well, but here are 3 resources for you. Bringing Back the Natives has a ton of information, and again, the link to the Doug Tallamy talk, which really gets you thinking about how you can help sort of carry these wildlife creatures through in pretty tough times. Calscape lets you, that is the California Native Plant Society's website, and you can go in and put in your address and see what plants would be native to your site. You want to use regionally appropriate plants where possible. It doesn't do any good to grow a plant that is from Southern California and supports a butterfly that we don't even have in the East Bay. So you want to be trying to use mostly regionally appropriate plants. And then the last link there is the Bringing Back the Natives website again, and there is a list, which I'm going to show you in just a minute, that I've sort of whittled down to the best plants that are practical for most of our East Bay gardens, because not all natives work in a garden, and there are some natives that really you'd have to own lots of land for some of these plants to work. So let's look at that. So what's practical for most gardens? So here's what I did. I used Calscape to whittle down all of these caterpillar and supporting plants. And then I whittled it down even farther for plants that would probably work in most gardens. So these are trees and shrubs that take on a tree-like form. So if you were looking for a tree or a shrub in your garden that looked like a tree, these would be good choices for you generally. And again, back here, the bottom link here is this list, but I just broke it out screen by screen so you can sort of see how you'd use these. This is a long list of shrubs that would be appropriate for the food web to possibly use in your garden. So, you know, everything from things that would be evergreen screens to things that would be focal points. Not every California native plant is a beautiful plant. And so maybe it supports a ton of life, but it's not that attractive. Do we put it front and center? We do not, but we put it somewhere in the garden where that life can happen, whether you see it every day or not. All the flowery stuff and the ornamental grasses. So things like our native penstemons and our milkweed, coyote mint, yarrow, buckwheats, lots of choices for more perennial choices. So more flowery, a little bit more showy at some point of the year. And some of our native vines that are the best ones for the food web and caterpillars. So these are plants that would be practical for most gardens. All right, so the design part. How do I design a native garden? This is a dry creek bed that I did in one of my very first mostly native gardens. There are some different things happening in this garden. In the far back corner with the tiny little pink blossom is our native currant, pink flowering currant. That's a ribes. And it's in that corner because that corner gets shade during the day. But right in front of it, at the edge of the dry creek bed, sort of front and center, is a manzanita, and it's pushed out into where it gets more sun during the day. You may not know these plants, but you can sort of see the repetition and the continuity. It's not one of everything. There are a few things here that are focal points, or you only need one of them, but there are definitely some plants in here that repeat, and that is harmonious to the eye. So let's talk about some of my tips for designing a garden with native plants. Okay, so if you're like me, and I will admit to this, ask my husband, you really should have a plan before you buy the plants. And I know it's hard. You go to the nursery and this looks good and that looks good. So let me say, there is a reason that I hardly ever take a client to the nursery. And that's because when we go, whatever happens to be blooming that time of the year is what the client gravitates towards. Well, that's not always a good idea. So we need to have a plan before we buy the plants. Whether it's a plan I helped you with, or another designer helped you with, or your gardener helped you with, or you did on your own, have a plan. And here's why as well. On the left side of this screen, you see all those cute little 1 gallons. That is Romnea coulteri, or Matilia poppy, or fried eggplant. And on the right, that is what one of those little 1 gallons turns into. That is truly an 8-foot tall shrub that spreads easily 12 feet. And it's an aggressive plant. It tries to quadruple itself somewhere else in the garden every year. That is not a suitable plant for every person's garden. I have it in my garden. Sometimes I kind of wish I didn't. It would probably take me dynamite to get it out. So I got it and I'm going to live with it. But I wish that I had thought a little bit more about that before I popped it in the ground where I did. The other things to think about. So we've talked about the size. I think hopefully I've sort of really drilled that into you. Drainage. When people call me and have me come and they say, well, I have clay. We all have clay. That's okay, but we can manipulate the drainage. We can plant on slopes. We can mound the soil up if we don't have slopes. There are ways to get around that. So we do have to take drainage into consideration, but it's not necessarily a hard stop just because you have clay soil. We all have clay. We have to take into consideration the light conditions. There are for sure some native plants that are sun loving, and if you pop them in the shade, they're not going to do anything. They're not going to perform at all. And alternatively, things that you see hiking at the coast that look like they're sun lovers, you bring them in, you plant them in your interior East Bay garden, and they fry like a French fry. They can do sun at the coast, but they can't always do sun once we get into the interior of the East Bay. So we really have to understand the light conditions in our yard, and we have to research a little bit about where the plant comes from, even though it's in the state of California, and whether or not it would work in full sun in your garden. So you have to take that into consideration. Water. People always assume that native plants are low water, and some of them are, but when you hike along a creek and you see our native snowberry or our native monkey flower, or you even see something like blue elderberry. Those things quite often have their roots into that creek bed at the edge. So they're getting water, even though it's the middle of July and no one is hand watering those plants. So you do have to think about that. Not all of them are low water, although many of them are. In our interior climate, when I'm on the native tour, which I've been on so many times, I can't remember how many times, people assume I don't water. I do water. It's really hot here. It was 110 here one day last week. My garden gets watered deeply, but infrequently. Even my manzanitas, even things that you would see hiking on Mount Diablo that you can see clearly are not getting any water. They look pretty frazzled by the end of the summer, especially if we've come off of a dry winter, which is not, I think this past winter was kind of dry, kind of wet, but before that we had a couple of wet winters. But before that, I think we had 3 really dry winters. So we have to keep that in mind as well. You can't ask them to perform and do what they could do in your garden without a drink now and then. So we do have to keep that in mind as well. Okay, zone denial. If you don't know what zone denial is, that is buying a plant from, Palm Springs and thinking that it's going to work in your garden. It may not. So if, we get hard frost, we get really high temperatures in the summer, not every native plant, just because it works somewhere in the state of California, works in our garden. So you do want to be realistic about the zones, because why bring a plant home and plop it in the ground and torture it to death before it dies? Don't do it. And then I already talked to you about this Matilia poppy. Some native plants are really aggressive. They continue to spread and they'll take over the whole garden if you let them. So you really want to plan properly and maybe not necessarily impulse buy and plant something that's going to do that. It's just going to be a nuisance down the line. All right, we also, because we're talking about wildlife and the habitat that native gardens offer, we want to plan for our customers. So this is Erigeron glaucus, or seaside daisy, and you can see the little ladybug on it. So we want to consider in our garden, in the planning stage, where we would provide sources for both food and water for the wildlife that's going to come to our garden. We want to consider offering shelter and a place to raise young, because that's what wildlife is looking for in your garden. No pesticides. I am part of the California Native Plant Society Facebook page. Every single day, somebody posts in there and says, I saw an aphid on my milkweed. Should I spray it with water? Should I get my, make my Dawn dish detergent vinegar solution and spray it? No, you should not. And here's why. Monarchs lay their eggs on milkweed. And if you spray the plant with a stream of water, you may dislodge the milkweed eggs. Also, aphids on milkweed end up getting eaten by ladybugs. So good bugs follow the bad bugs and take care of that. So I really condone a hands-off approach in the garden. Gardens are not perfect. They change every single day. You can't take it personally. Sometimes, especially if you're looking to have a wildlife habitat in your garden, unsightly is okay, not perfect is okay. We want to let nature sort of take its course. Good bugs will follow bad bugs. Not every plant looks good all the time. Rather than getting out there with your pruners the first day that the flower blossom starts to turn brown, leave it and let the birds eat the seeds and that sort of thing. So I do some pruning and cleanup in my garden seasonally, but I also leave, I leave my native sunflower till it's really down to almost just nothing. And that's because the birds pick the seeds off of it well into the fall and early winter. So unsightly is okay, imperfect is okay. We are planning for your customers. Okay, but don't forget, this garden is also for you. And so when I arrive at a job site for the first time, these are some of the things that I'm looking at. I am considering the views, both from inside the house looking out and from outside in the street looking up at the house. And let me tell you a little story. Before I was a garden designer, I was not a garden designer. And my first house, I put in a pond, and I brilliantly put it behind my chimney in my backyard, so I couldn't see it from any windows. So I it didn't occur to me that I would want to see it from the windows. So that just tells you there are lots of ways to have something turn out well, but you need to think about how you view it from different parts of inside the house and outside the house. Some of the things that I ask clients when I arrive to meet with them is, how do you want to use the space? Because a garden that is just for curb appeal, that you're not actually going to be out in, that might be a different looking garden than one where you're going to have a bench and you're going to sit and enjoy all the activity from wildlife. Or maybe when my girls were little, we sat in that bench and watched them play out in the street. I ask people what their style is. Are you symmetrical? If you have a shrub on the left, do you need that same shrub on the right? Or can it be a little bit more natural? Native gardens lend themselves to being a more natural looking garden, but I've done very clean, straight rows of plants in a native garden, and that's okay. If that's what you need, if your plants can't touch each other when they grow, that's okay. But that's something you want to think about. What's realistic from a maintenance perspective? Lots of native plants still need to be cleaned up at some point during the year, or pruned back, or deadheaded, or we've got some ornamental grasses that do best if they're cut down every 3 or 4 years and you sort of let them rejuvenate. Is that going to be realistic for you? If you've got a mow and blow guy who cuts everything into circles and squares, we need to have a talk, and then you need to have a talk. Okay, we've got to get him to stop cutting things into circles and squares, and we've got to plan for the space that a plant is going to need so that it can just keep a natural form and not have to be pruned so heavily. What's practical? If you live in a neighborhood with an HOA, or you live on a small court with just a few other houses and everybody's got lawn and very tidy shrubs and that sort of thing, then you may want to consider your approach to fit in and still be accepted as well. It doesn't mean you can't use native plants. It just means you have to plan for them to be a little bit more tidy and organized in the space, I would say. Also, a garden is more than plants. So what else can you put in that garden besides plants? I'm all for, 95% of it being plants, but maybe it's a bench, maybe it's a bird bath, boulders, a dry creek bed, a sundial. So think about what else you could put out there that would complement the plants and also maybe draw you out into the garden as well. Select the right plants for the right place in the right volume. So we talked about that fried eggplant a few minutes ago. You don't need 4 of those. You need 1, and you still have to keep it in check. So you want to definitely use the plants that are mostly regionally appropriate for you, that you know can do well in your climate. You want to position them in the right place in your yard so they get the right amount of light, so that they're hydrozoned with other plants that want the same watering requirements. And then in the right volume. Here, where this client was taking out a front lawn, but still wanted sort of a lawn-like look. This is our native Idaho fescue, which is also native to California. And we planted that so that when it fills in, it will look kind of like a lawn, a little bit lumpy, but still will look like a plane of green, to simulate kind of a lawn look. And so you can see this is right after the garden was planted and things are kind of getting started. This garden is in Dublin and was on the California Native, Bringing Back the Natives tour a few years ago. So we want to plan for where things go, and we want to make sure we space them appropriately so that we don't end up having to cut them way back because they've gotten too big for the space they're in. So we talked about regionally appropriate for the space. The keystone species, that was the list that I put up showing the oaks and the manzanitas and how many varieties of caterpillars those support. You want to definitely try to work in the keystone species if you can. Site the plants properly. For instance, butterflies don't generally want to land on plants in the shade. So you want to put them out in a nice sunny spot. You also want to generally mass them. So instead of having a butterfly plant over to the left 3 feet and over to the right 8 feet, it's better to plant those 2 plants together and make a larger mass of the same plant to attract the butterfly. So Calscape, sorry, that's up there. Calscape has a long list of nurseries that sell native plants, but in the Bay Area, these are usually good bets. So everything there from Annie's, some smaller ones that maybe you haven't been to, like Oaktown, which is out in Berkeley and has a really nice selection. East Bay Wilds is down in kind of the San Leandro Hayward area, I believe, and he usually has a really nice selection. Cactus Jungle, Bay Natives. And then as a last resort, you can always mail order from Las Politas if it's something you just can't find up here. We want to aim to create a garden with good bones, 4-season interest and harmony. So 4-season interest means maybe something's blooming every month of the year, but we can also count on good things like foliage color, texture among the plants. Maybe it has really beautiful peeling bark, cinnamon colored like the way manzanitas are. So we want to try to plan for that. This little grass in the foreground of this photo is Mendocino reedgrass, or Calamagrostis foliosa. It's so funny, when I was in my planting design class, when I was taking classes to become a garden designer, I sat in the class, and I think our talk was on ornamental grasses that day, and I thought, I don't know how I would use these in a garden. And it's so funny because they work great in a garden. They go with everything, and they're really good bones. That grass looks like that all the time in this photo. So in the dead of winter, when the flowery stuff is taking a break and some things have lost their leaves, that looks the same. And so I can count on that. It has good bones. That would be the same thing same way to think about evergreen shrubs and things like that. Repetition and continuity. Although we want to mass plants together, especially for attracting butterflies, we also want to have some continuity in the garden and some repetition. When there's one of everything, it is hard for the eye to know where to go. It's sort of like a circus. So it's better to repeat a plant either in groupings or in, if it's not a very big plant, maybe you put a cluster of 3 together, and then somewhere else in the garden you put 3 more. So that's how we get repetition and continuity in a garden. Harmony, a lot of things look really good together. So I will never forget my professor in my planning design class saying that most things look good together. So you can always move things around and try them out, but don't be afraid of putting a couple things together that you don't necessarily see together in photographs. Focal points. So manzanitas are beautiful focal points in a garden. In my own front yard, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 varieties. One is a beautiful focal point shrub that looks like a little tree. I've got manzanitas as a focal point flanking the entry path up to my front door. So they kind of act like little guards on each side of the path. There are other great plants that become beautiful focal points in a garden as well. And sometimes you only need one. So we want to keep that in mind with some of our beautiful plants. We want to also plan, I think I mentioned to you previously, not every plant looks good all the time. So let's go back to the milkweed for a minute. If you really want to have a habitat garden and support monarchs, you've got to have milkweed in your yard, and not tropical milkweed, which is the yellow or the orange colored one, but our native milkweeds. There's showy milkweed, there's narrow leaf, there's heartleaf milkweed. They all look, the umbel of the plant, the flower looks the same. It's kind of a pale creamy pink, and then as we get deeper into the season, it turns kind of coppery. You want to plant the milkweed that is appropriate to your location. It's not a good idea to plant a coastal milkweed in your garden if you're interior, and vice versa. But milkweeds always have little golden aphids on them, which makes them sticky and kind of yucky. And the ants also climb the milkweed because they're harvesting the secretion from the aphids. So where I want that in my garden, I want to attract monarchs and I want to support monarchs, but I don't want it right next to my path where I have to walk past it every day. Also, milkweed is very late to emerge in the spring. It's one of the last plants that finally sprouts a leaf above ground. So I don't want to put it front and center for that reason either. I want to tuck it elsewhere in my garden where when it's gone, I don't even notice it's gone. And when it's up, it can shine and do its thing, but I don't have to walk past it and touch it because it's kind of gross. And then it goes back down again in the fall, and it's out of sight, out of mind. So That's a good way to think about milkweed. So normally I plant it with a bunch of little ornamental grasses around it so that when it's gone, I don't notice it. I mentioned to you when I was showing you all those different creatures that I photographed in my garden. If you put out a buffet of food on plants and the caterpillars hatch and eat all the leaves, you're looking at stems with no leaves. So they will literally defoliate the plant down to almost nothing. That's kind of unsightly, but you did what your goal was to do, right? You offered the food and customers took you up on it and ate it. So again, that plant probably doesn't belong front and center. Tuck it somewhere else in the garden and let nature sort of take its course, but we're not going to use it for a front and center showstopper plant in the middle of our front yard, because it's not going to look good part of the year for sure. So remember, perfection in terms of attracting wildlife and supporting wildlife, perfection is not the goal here. So here is, for the humans that are using this garden, a quick look at the calendar and some of our native blooms. So there really is always something going on. In the dead of winter, when almost everything is taking a break, manzanita is coming alive with beautiful blossoms and that beautiful cinnamon colored bark. And then later on in the spring and early summer, it sheds. So the bark peels and it's really beautiful. And then we go on. I mean, lots of things are blooming in the spring. There's a reason we have that native tour the first weekend in May normally. That's because the garden is at its height. All kinds of things, wildflowers and spring bloomers are just finishing up and summer bloomers have already started. Then we get into midsummer and some of that stuff is done. It is starting to decline in its look and it's starting to head into dormancy and that sort of thing. But there are still lots of good things from July to November that kick in. So our buckwheats, our California fuchsias, milkweed's still going strong in my garden. And then, as I mentioned, so good texture from ornamental grasses. Green is a color. So when people say to me, well, I want color in my garden, well, green counts. There's silvery blue and there's silvery white and there's deep green and there's light green. So that counts. So you can get lots of different foliage colors from things like coffeeberry and quail bush and things like that. When in doubt, take your cues from Mother Nature, the best designer of all. If you hike or you visit Yosemite or you hit the trail closest to your neighborhood, really pay attention to what's growing around you and how it's situated together. It's a really good way to see nature at its best and perhaps take some of those ideas home and try to incorporate them into your garden as well. Okay, so hopefully we have some questions.
Yeah, that's great, Kelly. I'm literally inspired. I've been kind of waiting for the heat to dissipate.
All right.
So.
Let's plant some plants. Well, October, with a plan.
Cool. So got great questions up on the chat. First question here. Are you going to make those slides available, or at least the list of plants that you had, the shrubs and the trees and the other things that we can share? Good.
Yes, so the list is already posted on the Bringing Back the Natives Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour website. It's at the bottom of the page, and I think it has my name on it. I think it says Kelly Marshall's Plants for East Bay Gardens for Pollinators or something like that. But I'm happy to share the slides as well if you guys want to.
Great, cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was the question, Kelly. We had this is Tyler, and a couple people wondered if we could share the slides. So
of course,
we'll send an email to everybody after this event, and it will include a PDF version of Kelly's slides, so you'll have all that information.
Yes.
Great. And then addressing Tony's question, Tony, that the slides do contain that list of nurseries that Kelly mentioned. So here's a great question. Would you amend the soil with compost before you plant a native? Native plants aren't growing in high, rich, composty type of soil, right. But is that an appropriate thing to do?
I don't. I'm kind of tough love. So particularly if you happen to have gotten rid of a lawn and you used sheet mulching as a way to get rid of your lawn, you've already amended that soil and made it better than it ever was underneath a lawn. But if you haven't, if you're just taking out all your old shrubs and putting in new stuff, I don't amend. If we add soil at all to slope the soil, or we just need to backfill a little bit, we usually only use topsoil. The plants come in some decent soil from the grower typically anyway, and so I'll mix the soil that was in the pot back in with some topsoil if I have to, sort of half and half, but I do not amend. I also really don't fertilize at all. I know if any of you that are listening have ever seen Troy McGregor's garden, he worked for Ruth Bancroft, and he had a native plant nursery a few years back, and so he was growing, you know, all kinds of wonderful native plants. I guess it's probably been 5 years or so since he was doing that. He would tell me that he fertilized the monkey flowers, and that's mimulus, and I would always say, you do? And he'd say, you know, well, yeah, I mean, they bloom from April to November. They sort of bloom themselves to death after 3 or 4 years. So he told me he fertilized them lightly, and I thought, well, I don't fertilize anything. And I mean, I fertilize my tomatoes, but that's about it. I'm kind of tough love. My goals are to site the plant properly, adhere to zone denial. I have certainly bought some plants. I've bought plants in Palm Springs at a native plant nursery and brought them here and popped them in my garden, and they promptly died my first winter. So I really try to stick to what I know can grow here, and site it properly with the right water and the right light, and just sort of let it do its thing.
You know, one comment about natives is that I think, you know, driving up in the Sierras, you see a lot of Scotch broom, and I think some people think that that's a native plant, like one of the most invasive plants we've ever seen. What's your general opinion of things like Scotch broom? I guess where I'm going with this is, we may think something's a native. It's best to check with a nursery or a specialist to really guarantee that it's a native. Yeah,
that's right.
Or Cowscape. Look it up on Cowscape.
You can look it up on Cowscape.
There you go. Okay.
I would say monthly, someone will say, I want natives like lavender and sage. Well, we do have some native sages, but if you're seeing them generally when you're driving around in gardens or in shopping malls, they're probably not native. So it is worth it to do your research. The first time, I'm going to roll back here for a second. The first time that someone hired me to do a native garden, and I really didn't know all the plants yet, I bought this book, which is California Native Plants for the Garden.
Great.
So this is from the former director of the UC Botanical Garden, Carol Bornstein, along with Dave Frost and Bart O'Brien. And this was a really good book for me to understand, again, some of the better native plants for gardens, because not all of them work in gardens. They're just too big, or they're too aggressive, or they really, you know, they don't look good a good part of the year. And so it would be kind of weird to have it in your garden. So again, that's California Native Plants for the Garden. That's a really good source. But now, yes, Cowscape is fantastic. I think you can just go on there and look at, you know, the whole category of perennials and read about them all. But it's better to put in your address and see what is regionally appropriate for you.
Great. Here's a question about balancing planting with deer-resistant choices. You know.
Okay, yeah. So what I always tell clients is deer do not read lists. So if you have seen it on a list as listed as deer resistant, it might be. In general, deer will not usually mess with anything that has a pungency to the leaf. So any of our sages, any of our ornamental grasses, they usually won't mess with. Sometimes when plants come from the nursery, because they're in decent growing soil, they are a little more appetizing to deer. So deer may browse new plants at the beginning that normally they would leave alone later. But this book and Cowscape has lists of generally deer resistant plants. There's certainly, again, you know, some ceanothus, that's California lilac, have a smooth, shiny leaf. That's very appealing to a deer. But there are also some California lilac varieties that have a prickly, almost holly-like leaf. That is less appealing to deer. So it can be done for sure, 100%.
Great. Another question, someone wants to plant some plants in their front yard under a large sycamore tree. So that implies some shade. You know, what kind of plants would you recommend?
Okay, so in my front yard, I have a humongous fruitless mulberry that came with the house. It's really the only thing left in my front yard that was here when I moved in. So I have light filtered shade all day long, up against the foundation of my house and under that tree. So some of the things that I have planted out there that have done really well, I have our giant chain fern, that's Woodwardia fimbriata. I have our currant, the pink flowering currant, which is ribes. I have snowberry. I have coffeeberry, things that you would see if you were hiking in a redwood forest. A lot of those plants do well in light filtered shade. And then even as I get out to the edge and where the light is a little stronger, but it's still not hot full sun, things do really well, like any of our native buckwheats. Our native succulents like Dudleya and Luesiais, all which are coastal, cliff-hugging, sun-loving plants at the coast, they do really well in our interior gardens in filtered shade. So there's actually a large list of shade-loving plants that work well under non-native trees. That's okay.
Great. I've got a couple questions about invasive plants, and I'm not sure whether they're actually native or not, but it's a pain to deal with them. Number one is fennel. Is fennel a native? And I see it in vacant lots. It's okay, so it's invasive like Scotch broom. It's here, hard to deal with. Very hard to deal with.
It's a good, it actually is a good plant for swallowtail butterflies, but you can see when you go up over for me, when I go up over the Benicia Bridge, you start seeing it on the sides where the climate is a little more moderate, where it really doesn't seem to dive down for the winter. And you can see that it has spread everywhere really aggressively. Yeah. So
and it's hard to get out. That and Bermuda grass. How do you take care of Bermuda grass?
Okay, so what I say is you can get rid of it, but it's a battle, and it's a long-term battle. So if you've got a yard full of Bermuda grass, we always recommend sheet mulching. So again, I'm not a proponent of chemicals anyway, so there's no Roundup in my garage, but it doesn't do any good to spray it at the surface because the roots go down so deep below ground that you're really only killing it at the surface. So you are better to sheet mulch. If you don't know what sheet mulching is, that means cutting off the light to the soil with layering of either cardboard or newspaper, and then on top of that, some bark or mulch, wood chips, and eliminating the light to the soil so that everything below those layers of cardboard and wood chips begins to decompose and die. Even then, you will still have Bermuda grass pop up now and then from that as the cardboard begins to wear away over time, and you just have to get out there and hand pull. It's the same with ivy. It's the same with oxalis, which is a persistent weed that's really hard to get rid of. I really encourage sheet mulching and vigilance. Go out there every week and just sort of, keep an eye and see where you might see it popping up and keep pulling it. You're better also to hold off a little bit before you replant that space. Generally, people want to sheet mulch and then turn around and plant the garden 2 or 3 months later. If you can hold off for 6 or 8 months before planting and really get that Bermuda grass and any of those other noxious weeds under control before you pop a hole back into the ground, open the soil back up to the light, that whatever you had before is going to find that hole right away and pop back up. So you want to hold off on planting a little bit if you can.
Great. About ground covers, I was turned on to a plant called Lipia by a friend, and it appears that it grows in vacant lots, and it seems to be very drought resistant. Is it a native? I use it as an artificial lawn on my pathways.
It is native.
Great stuff. Oh,
yeah,
cool.
It is native. It is aggressive. So it's
properly aggressive. It spreads nicely.
Yes, it is aggressive. So you want to definitely contain it with some sort of an edge. And same thing, when it creeps over that edge, you want to get out there and start pulling it because it will fill the entire space you give it. Yes.
But it's nice stuff to have. I mean, it's kind of an alternative to a bark-based ground cover. Creeps around stuff very nicely.
Definitely.
Cool. Let's see. Can you incorporate existing?
Mark? Yes, that was the question. Go.
Right. All right. So Denise asked, can you incorporate existing fruit trees and vegetable gardens, I guess, into your native native plant habitat?
Yes. So what I have mostly see people do is I went on a sustainable food gardening tour in Benicia and Vallejo last spring. And what I mostly saw growing around the base of those fruit trees and things like that were wildflowers. So California poppy and Clarkia and stuff like that, which is all still, those are really good pollinator plants. So your goal growing edibles is to get those pollinators into your garden so they can pollinate your stuff. So wildflowers is probably the most practical thing. But wildflowers are generally quite often reseeding annuals. So they are not going to look good all the time. So what might I do? I might work in some of the smaller native ornamental grasses that can fill in and give me good bones year round here and there around those plants. Generally, fruit trees don't want to really share the space with anything below them for water and nutrients. So in the long term, as the fruit trees really start to grow, you're probably better just to leave the soil directly underneath the fruit tree bare. But there's nothing wrong with scattering in some wildflower seeds. Again, you're making almost a lifetime commitment. If you seed your garden with California poppies, that's great, but you're probably not going to ever get rid of them. They're always going to come back, and that's okay, but you just need to know that going in.
Which is a wonderful thing. It took me a while to get miner's lettuce established in my yard, which is a wonderful plant to have.
Claytonia, yes.
So we have a question here about bamboo creeping up repeatedly in every crack. Can't do sheet mulch. How do I get rid of it? Obviously, bamboo's not a native, I don't think.
Right.
But how to deal with that?
I believe, I'm sure you can find some sort of a concoction online, which is a combo of, I think, dish detergent and vinegar, I think, which will sort of fry it in the sun. That's probably the first thing I'd say. Also, if you don't have a hula hoe, I highly recommend getting a hula hoe. So I bought mine on Amazon for 20 bucks. That is a horseshoe shaped weeding tool with a long pole at the end. The horseshoe is hollow on the inside and the bottom is very sharp. And you can use that to sort of scratch, and it will behead your weeds down below as low as you can get it. So I've actually used that to weed pretty effectively, like in my fire pit area where I have stuff pop up in the gravel and that sort of thing. It's a back saver for sure.
Great. And we have a question about a good brand of native wildflower seeds.
Look at, if you look online at Larner Seeds, Larner. She is up in the North Bay and harvests seeds ethically and then sells seed packets. So that's a good source. That's where I buy mine.
Great. There's another recommendation here from Laura saying Renee's Garden Seeds.
Okay. All right.
Cool. So Tyler, do we want to open this up to other questions? Let's get some participation here. If you in the audience have a question, either raise your hand on the participant list and we'll call on you, or you can just chime in right now. Tyler, you want to unmute people, or?
Yeah, if you want to raise your hand, it might be easier for us to see if you have something to ask. But I can unmute now. It's we have to be careful not to get too loud. There's 100 of us. But
meanwhile, while we're waiting for people to raise their hand, what about false valerian? Are you familiar with false valerian? It seems to really thrive. It also spreads a little, but it's got a beautiful red flower.
Yeah.
And
white. It comes in white too.
Yeah, and I'm tempted to encourage it, but I also think of it as a weed. And what's your take on it?
Well, it's not native, and I think there's probably a better choice for pollinators and caterpillars than that, for sure.
Okay.
Look at one of our buckwheats. It has a similar flower and similar color, and probably a little better behaved, but also does double duty as a wildlife plant.
Great. I've planted Eriogonum before. It is really pretty, and it dries nicely. You can make
it's beautiful.
Nice dried flower arrangements. Do we have any questions from the audience? Other than
we
in the
just
chat?
had one that was on the chat earlier, and he just reminded us that we didn't answer it, and that was about natives for containers. This is somebody who doesn't have a big yard. Okay. What would you tell them, Kelly?
I would say as long as you can keep them watered. Lots of things work. Maybe so some of our shorter lived natives that you get quite a bang for your buck before they eventually sort of bloom themselves to death is going to be stuff like our native monkey flower, that's Mimulus. The straight species that you might see if you were hiking has kind of an orange bloom, but there are lots of hybrids available, white, yellow, red, pink, orange, and yellow mixture. Here's my cat. This is Joey. Okay, excuse me. So that's a good one that will, in our climate in interior East Bay, wants to be morning sun, shade in the afternoon. But that is a beauty that you can try in a pot. Our native Western azalea works well under those same kind of conditions. Morning sun, shade in the afternoon. If you've got hot, full sun, you might try any of our native penstemons. Any of the buckwheats work both sun or shade. You might try California fuchsia, our ornamental grasses. A lot of those look really beautiful in pots. Again, if you've got shade in the afternoon, you could try any of our native succulents. So that's going to be, we've got sedum that you would see at the coast, sedum spathifolium. We have any of our dudleyas, which are called live forevers or chalk live forever. Any of our loesias. All of those work beautifully in pots as well. So you get that structure of the succulent year round, but then you get a little bloom as a little, sort of icing on the cake. But again, out here, those are all better for morning sun and shade in the afternoon.
That's an interesting thought about succulents, that they don't necessarily bloom very frequently. So how does that fit into the native habitat for insects and plants?
When they bloom, you may see hummingbirds come to the bloom spikes of some of those, but in general, there's not a lot of action in terms of wildlife. But for humans, there is good structure, good bones. The rosettes and that sort of thing are really beautiful year round.
Cool. And then we've got a question here about your favorite pathway surface.
My favorite pathway surface. Well, I will list my favorite. Probably flagstone set on a little bit of sand. That's a very natural look, works well. The way that I view paths in general is the farther you get from the house, the more informal you can be. So my fire pit area is gravel with an aluminum edge holding it in place. My backyard paths are flagstone primarily. My front path is slate mortared in on top of concrete, but then my informal path that goes to my bench is flagstone on sand. So flagstone and sand is probably my favorite. Permeable is good. So if you are leaning towards concrete, I would encourage you to consider pavers so that you can let the groundwater, so you can let rainwater seep into the ground. And in terms of expense, the way that I describe it to clients is like this. Your least expensive path material is soil or mulch. And if it's a place in the garden that really is only for you to travel to, it's perfectly fine to just have mulch and walk on the mulch and don't put plants in that area. Then up from there is going to be some sort of stepping stones or gravel or pieces of flagstone. And then you get into really the more expensive stuff of concrete and pavers. Because the labor in laying pavers is pretty intensive. So there you go. Decomposed granite is another one that people like. That's permeable, although it's still, you can harden it with a stabilizer from the stone yard. And so you can actually like ride a bike on it or roll a wheelchair across it, but it's a little mucky in the winter. So if it's in a part of your garden where you're going to be in the winter, you probably don't want to use that. It tracks in the tread of your shoes. So you'll end up dragging it into the house. You want to think about that.
I am learning that gradually. I must say that I've been using wood chips in my pathways for 30 years, and I finally, and after 2 or 3 years they deteriorate, they need to be renewed, and bring in the truck. Sure. I finally put in granite fines, and it feels so permanent. It's great, just cleaning it off, and I've got my pathways again.
Yes.
We have a question here about companion plants for Pride of Madeira. Pride of Madeira tends to grow along the coast. Yes. Is it a native for number one?
It is not.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
I know.
I was very disappointed. I was very disappointed to see it was not.
I know, me too. If you've ever hiked along the cliff in Laguna Beach, it's all over the cliff. And if you've been to Angel Island, it's all over Angel Island. It is not a native. It is a good pollinator plant. You will see hummingbirds and bees on it, but it is not native. So what does that mean? It means if you've got it in your garden, you want to try to keep it from reseeding. And if you live next to open space, you want to be really responsible about only keeping it in your yard. Companion plants for it. Well, if you've got it in your garden and it's got any age to it, you're starting to probably see more foliage at the top and more leggy and twisty, turny bark at the bottom. So you want to plant low in the foreground. So I would look at things like any of our native buckwheats. It is a sun lover generally. So I'm assuming that your space that you've got to companion plant with it is also in the sun. Some of our lower growing ornamental grasses would look lovely with that. Some of our sages would look nice. White sage is one that blooms white rather than purple, and the leaf on it is very chalky and white as well. That's a really good pollinator plant. Let's see what else. If you wanted a ground cover down underneath it, you could try any of our native California lilac or manzanitas that come in a ground cover form. So some of my favorites for out here are emerald carpet or Pacific mist for manzanita. Both of those lie really low on the ground and sort of carpet and give you a green year round. And they also give you a winter bloom, which is really nice because Pride of Madeira blooms more late in the spring and very early summer. And California lilac is a spring bloomer. So it is more like a February, March bloom. So you could do some alternate with both manzanita and California lilac and have, you know, a winter interest, a spring interest, and then your Pride of Madeira.
Great. And here's a very important question from Denise asking about are natives, are there natives that are poisonous to dogs?
I'm sure. If a dog chews on the leaf of anything in the Solanum family, that is nightshade. I'm sure that would be poisonous. Also, one that you don't see in gardens very often, but is poisonous as well, is Datura, or that is it's also in the that's in the family of Brugmansia. It's got a great big tubular open flower. A lot of times, yes, it's
seed pod.
Really showy. And, you know, when I drive down Ignacio Valley between Clayton and Walnut Creek, you can see Datura on the hill. It grows fairly flat. It's got a great big white flower. It's a really good pollinator plant for the sphinx moth at night. So it's a cool plant. But if your dog chews on plants, it is not one you'd want to have in your garden. Those are the two that come to mind right away that you probably would consider possibly having in your garden that you probably shouldn't have in your garden.
And Pamela volunteered snowberries.
We have somebody with a raised hand here.
Okay. Yeah, go for it, Anna.
So, let's see. Anna, I am just getting ready to unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Hey, thanks for hosting this. I have a quick question. I'm a newbie to native plant gardening.
Okay.
And I have made the mistake, I believe, of planting some plants too close to each other.
Okay.
So I guess the question I have is, are there any particular, either, most of the ones I planted are perennial herbs or shrubs that I'm at a totally lost cause in terms of trying to replant it?
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that's my question. Thank you.
Okay. So when I think about moving, because I think what you're asking is, might I be able to possibly move some of these plants? The bigger, so things like manzanita, California lilac, our native sages, they're not going to move. Generally, they're too woody or too deep rooted, and disturbing them probably means that they will not survive the transplant. If I was going to try to transplant, you'd be better to wait till October, November, December to try to move something. But things that do move easily, our native iris moves quite easily. Any of the succulents move easily. The ornamental grasses would probably move if you've got the clump big enough. And sometimes like deer grass, that's Muhlenbergia riggans, gets 5 feet wide and people don't realize it's going to do that. So if you can dig up a great big clump of that, and you can even slice it down the middle and make 2 plants, that one would probably move. But any of the more deeply rooted things, which most natives have really deep roots, usually do not move if they've been established over 6 months or a year. Hopefully I answered your question. And if you have specific plants that you want to ask me about, please do.
Then we have basically a last question on fertilizing natives in containers. You suggested obviously that we not fertilize plants in the ground, but containers, you
Yes.
use up the nutrients in containers. And then what would you recommend for container natives?
I would say that yes, I think that's realistic to expect to add some supplement to the soil over time in a pot, since it can't get it from anywhere else. And I would just probably use something diluted and pretty basic, pretty general. Nothing crazy. Don't add cow manure or anything like that. Just use some sort of a basic fertilizer, but dilute it down. Don't go crazy. Because what happens is the plants sometimes respond as if they're on steroids, and so they're fantastic, and then they sort of crash and burn. So very sparing if you do that.
Great. Tyler, anybody? I don't see any other raised hands.
No.
Last questions.
There was just a little question about native sages, but
yeah, actually, that was a good question. What sages are native to the Bay Area or the East Bay?
There's dozens of them, aren't there?
Native. I can't say specifically which. Like if you hike on Mount Diablo, I know you would see Salvia clevelandii, chaparral sage, black sage, which is Salvia mellifera, Salvia sonomensis is from the North Bay. So those are some of the ones that you probably would see hiking in a garden. I use Salvia clevelandii quite often. I use Salvia bee's bliss, which is a cultivar that looks very nice and lays kind of low on the soil. So it's not a real tall one, because a lot of those sages are 4 or 5 feet tall and wide. Black sage is a creeper, so it goes low and wide. Purple sage, I think that's Salvia leucophylla, I believe is a Southern California sage, and that goes 8 or 12 feet wide. So it's a big span. So you want to be careful for sighting those, but some of my favorites are definitely any of the Clevelandia hybrids. The smallest one that I can think of in that group is Winifred Gilman, which is maybe about 4 by 4. And then those are sun lovers for sure. If you put them in the shade, they will sort of reach to try to get to the sun. If you've got some shady areas in your garden for sage, you want to look at Salvia sonomensis. You want to look at hummingbird sage, which is Salvia spathaceae. Those are both good ones for shady parts of your garden for sage.
Cool. A couple more questions. One about sages. Katvi says, sages don't usually require a lot of water, but is it, if they're looking really dry, is it okay to water them in the morning?
Sure. I think you want to, I think if you didn't hear me, I water my manzanitas and I water my California lilac, which are two things people think right away, oh, no water in the summer. No, out here, it's really hot. And those plants look a little better with just a little deep drink now and then. So I couldn't tell you how many varieties of sage I have in my garden, but they all get water every 7 to 10 days during the growing season. So I definitely water for sure.
Great. And then last question, what would you recommend for a 4 to 5 foot hedge?
How wide? Can you answer?
Good question. Let's see. Dennis, you want to tell us
Dennis,
in the chat?
And, I think I can find you, Dennis. Let me see. I have, no, not quite. One second.
You can put in the chat. Well, let's just say 10 or 15. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Anyway, like 10 or 15 feet long, something like that along the side of a yard.
So the thing to remember.
Here it says 3 to 4 feet wide. Okay.
3 to 4 feet wide. Okay. So the thing to remember about things that get tall quite often also want to get wide, and not everything looks good sheared and trimmed, edged. So what your light conditions are, Pacific wax myrtle would be one that you could trim more narrowly, but it's got quite a bit of height to it. So you would also need to keep it at that 4 to 5 foot height that you want it at. I like coffeeberry as a screen, but it's probably, you need to plan for it to be 5 foot wide in addition to 5 foot tall. What I have at the edge of my property screening me from my next door neighbor is Arctostaphylos sentinel, which is about 6 feet tall and probably 4 to 5 feet wide. That's a sun lover, so you wouldn't put that in the shade for sure. 4 to 5 feet, what else? But not very narrow. Those are probably my biggies, would be Pacific wax myrtle, coffeeberry, manzanita, if you've got the width for that. I have quail bush in my garden. That's Atriplex. That is probably about 6 feet wide and seems to be able to take any amount of trimming. It's quite happy in my garden, so it's tried to spread out. It's not that it's, you know, replicating itself, but the clump of it's gotten quite large, and I've cut that back numerous times, no problem. So quail bush might be a good one too. And it's called quail bush because the quail eat the seeds from it, and they hide. It's so dense that they hide in the branches of it too. So that's a good one that you don't see very often in people's gardens.
Great. Well, Kelly, thank you very much. I really appreciate the information, and we had a great audience here. Kelly Marshall with Kelly Marshall Garden Design. I really encourage you to visit her website at kmgardendesign.com. Check out the photos of her work. I was very impressed when I checked it out, and encourage you to also. So if you folks have a little bit more time, we'd like to share our sustainability tip of the month. Tyler?
Okay, here we have that. And this month, as we're doing consistently now, we are lining up our tip of the month, not only seasonally, so we're talking about things that are appropriate for this time of year, but the campaign for this particular tip, Stay Cool, is also being joined by our youth team, Sustainable Leaders in Action, and they're promoting this as well. So the youth team is a new enterprise we've got going at Sustainable Contra Costa with a bunch of really fabulous young people doing amazing work. They've got a great newsletter, which you can check out on our website. So anyway, their tip of the month that we're all promoting comes from the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, which is a fabulous platform. If you haven't heard about it, you do need to investigate this, because it's a great way for you to lower your carbon footprint and really take personal action around the issue of climate. But it's fun, it's full of resources. Every action you take on the challenge gives you ways to do it, instruction from different organizations that have tutorials and guidebooks and things, and ways to save money taking these climate actions, and ways to make them easy. And then there's a fun sort of social side of it in which you can join with other folks, form a team, and track your points together. And we have some friendly competition going. Our spring-summer challenge is just about to end in a few days, but we'll be starting up another one in a month or so. And it's really fun to form a team. So you'll find this action called Stay Cool on the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, and it's reminding us that there's a lot of things we can do that are very simple that add up to significant energy savings. So when it's cool at night, as it has been for the last few days, you can draw that cool air in. Now, of course, if it's smoky outside, like we just went through, you shouldn't do that. But if you have the ability to get that cool air in and then close the windows up during the day, that can make a big difference. We've also been learning a lot about how much a ceiling fan, how much of a difference it makes. Even if you have regular air conditioning, it's been shown that you can set that AC thermostat 4 degrees higher if there's a ceiling fan to help circulate the air. Drapes with a reflective white backing or blinds that are angled in an upward direction are a great way to keep the heat out when it's hitting those windows, or awnings or overhangs if your windows are east and west facing. You could do them on south facing windows too, but then you'd be perhaps blocking the winter sun as well, which maybe we want when it gets cold. And then consider a very high efficiency replacement for your heating and air conditioning if you're at that stage and you're ready to think about a new unit. There are some amazing heat pump based all electric systems now that are incredibly efficient. So really the way to get more details on that is to visit a county program called BayRen, and the website for homeowners is bayrenresidential.org, with amazing amount of resources and links to rebates, contractors that come out to your home and look at every single aspect of it in terms of energy use. So do check that out. And then, of course, if you're on the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge, each action has an action plan. If you commit to that action, it takes you through the steps. So it's great. Stay cool this summer.
Great. Thank you, Tyler.
That's our tip.
Excellent. Good idea. Let me highly endorse an attic fan. Makes a huge amount of difference.
Yes.
You know, a couple $100. It really did lower down the heat radiating down from the ceiling during those really hot days. So, and now for the upcoming events, Tina.
Well, I actually think Colleen was going to tell us about upcoming events,
Colleen.
but we'll get
Okay.
Tina in here in just a minute.
There you go. Okay, Colleen, please.
I think Colleen may be having a muting problem. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
There's Colleen.
Great.
Hi, everyone. So I'll begin by mentioning the first event we have coming up. We have a climate careers panel on September 8th. Earlier, Tyler mentioned our amazing youth team, Sustainable Leaders in Action, and they will be hosting their first event on September 8th from 7 to 8:30. A branch of Sustainable Contra Costa, the youth group strives to uplift and cultivate a network of next generation environmental activists and provide Contra Costa youth with opportunities for professional development and collaboration. This event will be an interactive virtual panel via Zoom featuring professionals working in sustainability and environmentally focused fields. In this event, the Climate Careers Chat, guest panelists will deliver a short presentation on their background, various milestones throughout their journeys, and also they will answer questions during an audience-based question and answer session. The chat will allow youth within our community to discover the vast array of green job opportunities and network with professionals. And this is a free event that is open to anyone who's interested in just learning about green careers or maybe their next position. So you're welcome to join us for that. Next, we have our Sustainability Awards online gala. That, again, will be a completely virtual event held on September 17th from 7 to 8:30. Tyler, would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, I just want to say the gala part of this event is going to be a lot of fun. So we're going to have the awards presentation at 7 p.m. and it's really awesome to just see the folks who've won the awards and be inspired by the work they're doing in all sorts of different areas in the county. So that starts at 7 o'clock on the 17th. But we are not letting the pandemic slow us down from having some fun and raising some funds for Sustainable Contra Costa. We're going to hold what we're calling a SIP, S-I-P, reception before the gala. And we're going to do it virtually, but it's going to involve local sustainable winemakers, beer breweries. We've got Cali Craft Brewing that's donating some beer, local restaurants. And so your opportunity is to sit at home with wine or beer or possibly non-alcoholic beverages. We're working on that, delivered to you. And while you're enjoying the gathering online, we will have the winemakers come on from these amazing local wineries that practice sustainability in everything they do, from their growing practices to producing and bottling the wine. We've got the wonderful Viano Vineyards, which is operated by the grandson of the founder, wonderful local winery completely connected with our local environment and community. And then Captain Vineyards, which is literally on a hillside in Orinda, and they have some fabulous sustainable practice they use. And you'll hear about all of that while you are enjoying a glass of this delicious wine and some food from local restaurants. So look for information on our SIP, S-I-P reception that will precede the awards event on the 17th.
Thank you, Tyler. So our awards will recognize local individuals, businesses, nonprofits, and also youth who are doing amazing work in sustainability in the county. So don't miss it. Please join us for that event. Finally, we have our next episode of Sustainability Live. It will be held at the same time, 7 to 8:30 on September 23rd. And during this episode, we'll be highlighting some of our winners from the gala. So for example, we'll honor and hear more from the individual, nonprofit, small business, and Lifetime Achievement Award winners. So if you'd like to learn a little bit more about what they're doing, maybe be inspired yourself and hear about how you can make an impact in the county as well, please join us for that. Finally, you can find it all at sustainablecocoa.org. You can reach out to us if you have any questions, and you can also take climate action with us in your everyday lives and also in your community through the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge. You can find that at cleanercontracosta.org.
Great. Thank you very much, Colleen. So Tyler, does Tina have any last words for this show?
Yeah, Tina, well, first I have to unmute her, but I think Tina was going to tell us about the fabulous prize that we can get for the team. Oh, I don't see her.
No.
Oh, there she is. Okay, I've unmuted you, Tina. Tell us about that prize.
Well, hi there, everybody. This has been so fun. Thank you. I cannot believe we got to hear Kelly share all this amazing information with us. I'm so inspired as well. Thank you, Kelly and Kathy, at bringing back the Natives Garden Tour. Yeah, so anybody who participates in the Cleaner Contra Costa Challenge this month and takes at least one action and posts about their action can go take that screenshot of that to EcoMulch and get a free yard of mulch. If you want more, of course, they're happy to sell you more. And they have delivery. And they're also donating a big, beautiful trough planter filled with soil that you can fill with beautiful native grasses and plants. So that will be our grand prize. So we'll have a drawing for that at the end of this month.
Great.
Thank you. I just wanted to show if anybody needs to see how you can connect with Kelly. That's her website and her email. And our guest who was not able to be with us tonight, who was going to do a dual presentation with Kelly, was Kathy Kramer. Kelly mentioned her several times, the Bringing Back the Natives tour. So there's the website. You can find out about that as well. Kathy is also an amazing resource.
Definitely.
Great. Well,
yeah, here's our contact information. You can connect with us. And this presentation will be up on our YouTube channel. I think by the end of this week, we should have that in the next couple of days.
Thank you. And Colleen, you want to read the credits?
Yeah.
Up, you're muted. There we go.
This has been Sustainability Live, a production of Sustainable Contra Costa, presented as part of our community education and outreach program. Our goals for this show are to provide you with useful and timely information about all aspects of living sustainably, guided by the 10 One Planet Living principles, and to provide an online community for sharing information and learning together. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Central SAN, Mount Diablo Resource Recovery, Contra Costa Green Business Program, MCE, the cities of Antioch, Pittsburgh, Martinez, Pleasant Hill, and Walnut Creek, Republic Services, Contra Costa Water District, EcoMulch, who donated our fabulous prizes for the challenge, Recycle Smart, and Contra Costa Center Transit Village. I'd also like to thank tonight's volunteer crew, producer Gotham Sathasan, director and host Mark Westwind, and technical director Tyler Snordham Phelps. For more information about One Planet Living and all of Sustainable Contra Costa's programs, activities, and special events, please visit our website at sustainablecocoa.org. And your support is always welcome. You can also make a donation on our website.
Great. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah,
Colleen is our community organizer.
And thanks again, Kelly. Really, really inspiring presentation. I'm looking forward to getting out there and planting some natives. So see you all next time. Thank you all for attending. Really pleased with the attendance tonight and all the great questions. Join us next time.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.